You wake up face down in dust, so fine it sticks to your gums, tasting like gunpowder and yesterday's regret. The grit clings to your tongue, each particle a tiny tombstone marking the grave of better decisions. Your mouth is a desert within a desert, and when you try to swallow, your throat clicks dry as rifle hammers. The air is thin, sharp, flavored with animal sweat and distant gun oil, scents that weren't in the pamphlet that lured you west, with promises of fortune and freedom. The dawn light slices across the cracked earth, crimson fingers stretching over a landscape that seems to have been forgotten by God sometime during creation. You can already feel the sun sharpening its knives against the horizon, readying for another day of merciless butchery. In 2 hours, that gentle morning glow will transform into a blistering assault that makes men hallucinate water where there is only more dust and broken dreams. Your throat aches for a drink that isn't there. The emptiness of your canteen matches the emptiness of your pockets. Last night's cards weren't kind, though kind isn't a word that belongs in this territory anyway. You lost everything but the clothes on your back and the stubborn heartbeat in your chest. Somewhere beyond the warped horizon, a coyote laughs at your optimism, its yipping call echoing across the flatlands like some demented sermon. You roll onto your back, and the sky wheels above you, impossibly blue, cruelly beautiful. Stars retreat like cowards before the dawn's advance. You wonder if this is what drowning feels like, this vastness pressing down while you struggle for purchase against nothingness. The coyote calls again, closer now, perhaps wondering if you're dead yet or just rehearsing. Your head throbs with last night's whiskey, rotgut poison that the saloon keeper swore was Kentucky's finest. You've never been to Kentucky, but you're certain they wouldn't claim that amber battery acid as their own. It had burned going down, and now it burns, coming up as you heave dryly into the sand. Nothing comes out. There's nothing left inside you to give. A scorpion scuttles past your hand, pausing briefly, as if considering whether you're worth the sting. It decides against it, and moves on, leaving you with the peculiar feeling of having been judged inadequate by an arachnid. You watch it disappear into a crack in the earth, envious of its certainty, its belonging. You haul yourself upright, and the ground tilts, a carnival ride without the carnival. Your back protests with the crack-pop symphony of vertebrae, realigning after a night spent on hard-packed dirt. The world spins once, twice, then reluctantly settles. You've slept in worse places, though not many. At least the desert doesn't charge rent or ask questions about your past. Your boots, too new, too soft, bite your ankles as you stagger forward. They're the last remnant of your former life, purchased in St. Louis with money that seemed plentiful then. The leather wasn't made for this landscape. It's already cracking like the earth beneath it, surrendering to the elements just as you fear you might. Yesterday, a blister formed on your left heel. Today it's burst and weeping, each step a fresh lesson in regret. Ahead, perhaps a mile across the flatlands, a scatter of warped plank facades clings to the desert like a bad rash. A town, or something masquerading as one. You saw it last night before sunset, decided it was too far to reach before dark, and then promptly lost your bearings when 3 cowboys invited you to share their fire and their whiskey. You should have declined. You should have kept walking. You should have done a lot of things differently. The sign marking the town's entrance comes into focus as you approach, welcome scrawled in paint that's more hope than pigment. It hangs crooked from a weathered post, one nail shy of giving up altogether, much like the settlement it announces. The lettering is faded, punishment for its optimism in this environment. Beneath it, someone has carved to hells with a knife point, the addition now worn smooth by sandstorms, but still legible enough to serve as warning. You pass beneath it anyway, because the alternative is heat stroke and loneliness measured in vulture circles. At least in town there might be water, shade, perhaps even the chance to earn back some coin. The path before you stretches taut as a hangman's rope, leading straight to a collection of buildings that shimmer in the growing heat like a mirage. You wonder briefly if the town is real at all, or just another of the desert's cruel jokes. Your shadow stretches long behind you, a dark companion that will shrink and vanish as the day progresses, abandoning you like everything else. Your lips are cracked, splitting further with each attempt to wet them. Blood beads at the corner of your mouth, and you lick it away, grateful for even this meager moisture. The town solidifies as you approach. No mirage, then, just weathered wood, canvas awnings, drooping like surrendered flags, and the occasional glint of glass that isn't yet frosted by sand and time. The buildings huddle together, as though for protection, their warped boards and slouching roof lines suggesting a collective exhaustion. Nothing stands straight in this place. Everything leans, bows, or hunkers against the relentless assault of sun and wind. A tumbleweed skitters across your path, nature's equivalent of nervous laughter. You step over it and finally cross what passes for the town's threshold, a strip of ground where the desert's tan gives way to dirt packed hard by hooves, boots, and wagon wheels. Main Street, such as it is. You have arrived. Inside Main Street's single artery, every window watches you. Glass eyes, dusty and flat, track your progress through the settlement. Curtains twitch, shadows shift behind the panes. New arrivals are rare enough to warrant scrutiny, especially those who stumble in at dawn, looking half dead and fully desperate. The buildings loom on either side, their false fronts reaching skyward in a sad attempt at grandeur. Behind these theatrical facades, the structures taper to humble shacks, like overdressed beggars hiding their true circumstances beneath borrowed finery. Saloon, general store, assayer, undertaker. The signs hang at improbable angles, each letter a gamble against gravity and indifference. Saloon doors waggle in the morning breeze, creaking like an old man's knees. The hinges speak, a rusty dialect of warning. From within comes the sour perfume of stale beer, tobacco spit, and humanity unconcerned with its own ripeness. You imagine stepping inside for water, maybe even coffee, if destiny feels generous. But the stench of last night's beer and blood cocktail wafts out to greet you, and you gag on the greeting. Congratulations, it's 1874, and you've already failed the smell test. A man sprawls, face down, on the boardwalk outside the saloon, either dead or wishing he was. His hat has tumbled away, revealing a bald spot, pink and vulnerable as a newborn scalp. He snores wetly, proving life, if not dignity. You step around him, careful not to wake whatever demons chased him into oblivion. Across the street, two old men in suspenders play checkers atop an upturned barrel. Their faces are leather maps of hard country, creased with lines that tell stories you're not yet qualified to hear. They pause their game to observe your passage, eyeing you with the casual interest of vultures, assessing something not quite dead enough to approach. One spits a stream of tobacco juice that lands with impressive accuracy, just shy of your boot toe. It's a statement of territory, of belonging, a reminder that you have neither. Your lungs burn with grit as you cross to the livery. The stable sign hangs by a single chain, swinging in the breeze like a noosed man caught in a draft. The building itself leans so severely, it seems to be perpetually falling, caught in architectural suspense. The smell hits you before you reach the door. Hay, manure, leather, and lanolin, a pungent cocktail that speaks of life amid desolation. The stable boy, 15, going on, embalmed, eyes you from a perch on a hay bale. His skin is sun-leathered already, freckles like copper pennies scattered across cheeks and nose, hair, the color of dirt, and just as abundant. He chews a straw that probably died from typhoid, rolling it from one side of his mouth to the other with practiced nonchalance. His eyes, though, are sharp, taking in your city boots, your sunburned cheeks, the desperate hope you're failing to hide. Need something, he drawls, not bothering to stand. You inquire about a horse, transportation, any means of moving beyond this blister on the landscape. He laughs so hard, his freckles rearrange, a seismic shift of amusement across his young old face. Horse? He repeats the word, as though you've asked for a unicorn, or perhaps a flying machine. Mister, you know what horses cost round here. He tells you the going rate, more money than you've ever seen, and an IOU signed in sweat and bullet casings. Horses are valuable out here, more valuable than most men. They don't drink whiskey, don't gamble away their wages, don't die of stupid pride or stubborn fevers. A good horse is worth 10 of you, and both you and the boy know it. Got a mule with a mean streak and one eye, he offers, after watching you digest the impossibility of affording a horse. Might sell for less, might kill you in your sleep though. You back away because you value what remains of your dignity, and what remains of your blood. The boy's laughter follows you out into the brightening day, the sound as dry as the creek beds that vein the surrounding countryside. Hunger hits next. It isn't subtle. It's a gut punch that folds you like cheap cards, a hollow ache that reminds you of childhood winters when food was scarce and stomachs growled through the night like angry bears. You scan the street for a diner, a bakery, anything that might offer sustenance. The town seems designed to mock basic human needs. Plenty of places to drink, gamble, and procure company of questionable virtue, but food appears to be an afterthought. Then you spot it, a lean-to of warped clapboards attached to the back of the general store, like a desperate afterthought. Smoke curls from a tin chimney pipe, and the scent of grease cuts through the morning air. A hand-painted sign declares EETs. No promises of what kind, just the basic acknowledgement that sustenance might be had. Inside, a woman fries something unidentifiable in lard, so old it's growing philosophical. Her face is a study in hard living, skin tanned to leather, eyes faded to the color of weak tea, mouth set in a line straight as a ruler's edge. She doesn't look up when you enter, just keeps turning whatever meat occupies her skillet, with a fork missing one tine. The smell is a dare, part invitation, part warning. Your stomach growls loud enough to make conversation unnecessary. The woman glances up, taking in your sorry state with a flicker of something, not quite pity, maybe recognition of a familiar desperation. You accept her culinary challenge, because the one rule of the frontier is simple. Eat first. Ask questions never. She slides a tin plate across the rough-hewn counter. On it sits what might once have been an animal, one with legs and possibly fur, now transformed by heat and time into a stringy, sour, but absolutely necessary meal. You choke it down while she counts your coins with eyes like coffins, dark, narrow, measuring. The mystery meat is tough enough to make your jaw ache. Each bite requires commitment, and faith. You wash it down with what passes for coffee, a liquid black as sin, and twice as bitter. It might have seen coffee beans once, perhaps waved to them across a room, but any actual relationship seems unlikely. You consider asking what animal it was, then remember your sanity is already on life support. Some mysteries should remain unsolved, especially when they've already been digested. The woman takes your coins with hands that have seen more work than rest, dropping them into a pouch tied at her waist. She nods once, the closest thing to thanks or farewell you're likely to receive, and returns to her skillet where another slab of something awaits transformation. Fortified by questionable protein, you explore further. The town has 3 streets if you count the alley full of broken bottles and lost intentions. Most buildings face the main thoroughfare, turning their backs on the smaller paths as though ashamed of their existences. You wander down one of these secondary routes, past sagging porches and windows patched with everything from newspaper to stretched animal hide. A blacksmith hammers at a horseshoe, each strike a migraine in metal. His forge glows orange-white, a miniature sun captive in stone. The man himself is as solid as his anvil, forearms thick as fence posts, chest broad beneath a leather apron, scorched by years of flying sparks. Sweat streams down his face, cutting clean tracks through the layer of soot that coats his skin. Sparks fly with each hammer fall, brief stars born and dying in the same moment. The iron glows like a promise, malleable now but soon to be cooled and hardened into something that might outlast both maker and user. You watch too long, mesmerized by the rhythm, the raw creation unfolding before you. The blacksmith looks up, catching your stare. Move or lose an eye. He growls, no patience for spectators when there's work to be done. You move quickly, because eyes are expensive, and replacement parts haven't been invented yet. The frontier values functionality. A one-eyed man might survive, but he'll never be trusted to shoot straight or spot trouble on the horizon. Best to keep all your original equipment when possible. Someone shouts draw at the far end of the street. The word cuts through the morning air like a knife, silencing conversation, freezing motion. Even the dust motes seem to pause. 2 silhouettes pivot toward each other from opposite sides of the street, outlined against the strengthening sunlight. Their arms jerk upward like marionettes on murder strings, the motion practiced to the point of ritual. You hear twin shots, sharp, final, biblical. The sound rips through the fabric of the day, momentarily deafening. There is no echo, just the report, and then a silence so complete it feels like a physical presence. One man drops, a puppet with cut strings, crumpling to the dirt without ceremony. The other, still standing, still breathing, holsters his revolver with practiced ease, shrugs as though apologizing for a minor inconvenience rather than homicide, and limps toward the saloon, already bored with the outcome. You blink, heartbeat stuck somewhere in your throat. The entire incident took perhaps 5 seconds, a duration shorter than sneeze, yet a life ended, a future erased. Welcome to justice. Distilled, unfiltered, served warm. This is law at its most elemental, stripped of courtrooms and arguments and proof. A man lives until he doesn't, and the one who remains standing writes the story. Shock fades fast here, because it must. The town resumes its rhythm. People step around the fallen man. Conversations pick up mid-sentence. Commerce continues. Death is common currency in a place where life holds uncertain value. A woman hanging laundry behind a nearby house pauses only long enough to sigh, shaking her head not in sorrow, but resignation, before returning to her wet sheets. You step around the downed gunman, noting how sunlight pools crimson into the dust and dries it matte. The blood darkens as you watch, transforming from bright accusation to dull statement of fact. Nobody helps. Nobody screams. This isn't the first body to cooled by this dirt, and the street bears its history of violence without comment. A teenager kicks the corpse's boots just to see if they'll fit, testing for a potential upgrade to his own footwear. They don't, but he takes the revolver, checking its chamber before tucking it into his waistband. Free inventory. Waste not, wanton. You swallow hard because you thought death would be louder, more significant somehow. Back east, a man dropping dead in the street would cause panic, investigation, grief. Here, it's barely a ripple in the day's flow. The sheriff arrives last, a man whose badge seems more a target than a symbol. He's old for this country, 50, maybe 55, with a grey mustache that droops at the edges like wilted flowers. His gun belt sits low on narrow hips, worn smooth by years of use. He spits tobacco onto the body, a brackish brown stream that lands on the dead man's shirt front, adding final insult to fatal injury. He pulls a notebook from his jacket pocket, scribbling half-hearted notes with a pencil stub, the victim's name, the shooter's name, the date, facts that will be filed away in some dusty cabinet, testimony to a bureaucracy that persists even at civilization's ragged edge. The sheriff eyes you, new meat, and tips his hat, as though to say, stick around, we'll carve your headstone next. The gesture is both greeting and warning. His gaze lingers, assessing, categorizing. You're not the first drifter to wash up on this desert shore, and he's seen enough to know most don't last. You nod, because apparently that's the correct etiquette, also because your voice has fled somewhere between fear and dehydration. The simple act of acknowledgement seems to satisfy him. He turns back to his task, measuring the body with steps that have paced out too many similar scenes. Clem Jenkins, the sheriff mutters, though whether he's identifying the dead man or addressing an unseen deputy is unclear. Third this month. Christ Almighty. 2 men arrive with a plank stretcher, lifting the body with practiced efficiency. They don't bother to close the dead man's eyes, which stare skyward with milky accusation. As they carry him toward a building marked a mortuary and carpenter, you notice a detail that turns your stomach. Beneath the spreading bloodstain on his chest, the man's shirt pocket still holds a sealed letter, its corner visible, now stained crimson. Words meant for someone who will now receive only tragedy instead. The morning continues, the sun climbing higher, washing the street in harsh light that leaves no shadow for secrets. People pass by, men with trail drive in their eyes, women with exhaustion etched in the lines around their mouths, children aged before their time. No one looks directly at you, but everyone sees. You are assessed, measured, your worth calculated in glances. Afternoon climbs overhead. The heat intensifies from uncomfortable to punishing, the sun baking thoughts into hallucinations. The air shimmers above the street, making distant buildings waver like reflections in disturbed water. Flies colonize everything, door frames, window sills, the rim of the horse trough. Their persistent buzz forms a background soundtrack to the drowsy middle hours when even ambition wilts. You seek shade beneath a balcony teetering like a drunk on stilts, its support posts warped by years of extreme temperatures. The wood is sun-bleached, spotted with darker patches where knots have been hardened by time into near petrification. You lean against the building wall, feeling rough-hewn planks against your spine, grateful for even this meager respite from the sun's assault. Sweat scalds your eyes, salt burning as it trickles down from your forehead. Your shirt clings to your back, wet patches spreading like maps of unknown territories. Thirst returns, stronger now, a desert predator stalking your strength. Your tongue feels swollen, oversized in a mouth gone papery dry. From your position, you overhear fragments of conversation from the men gathered on the porch of the general store across the way. Someone mentions water rights. Who owns the well? Who guards the river? And you realize hydration here is politics, and politics here is murder with paperwork. In a place where water means life, control of it means power, absolute as any king's. Danvers says the creek's his, since it starts on his land, one man argues, tobacco juice punctuating his statement as he spits over the railing. The creek's been common water since before his daddy squatted on that claim. Another counters, voice as gravelly as the riverbed under discussion. My cattle been drinking there 20 years. The conversation continues, technical points debated with the intensity of constitutional scholars, but with far more practical implications. You listen, understanding now why men kill over liquid here, why settlements grow where they do, why power flows like and with water. The town's single water barrel sits outside the general store, padlocked against lawless tongues. It's a substantial container, iron-banded oak standing waist-high, with a metal dipper chained securely to one side. A man stands guard nearby, shotgun cradled in the crook of his arm, eyes constantly scanning the street. Not official law, perhaps, but authority nonetheless. You consider stealing a sip, calculating angles and distractions, weighing thirst against risk. Then you notice the warning nailed above the barrel. Thieves will be shot, survivors will be shot again. The message is clear as desert sky. No room for misinterpretation or leniency. The water guard catches your eye, nods once as if to say he's seen your consideration, and stands ready to enforce the posted policy. So you purchase a tin cup of lukewarm swamp from a roadside seller who swears it's fresh. He's a skeletal man with eyes sunk deep in a face that's seen too much sun and too little joy. His cart holds 3 barrels of varying sizes, each marked with chalk, drinking, washing, and horses. The prices increase with portability, and you pay premium for what he claims is fit for human consumption. It tastes like pennies and plague, metallic and vaguely threatening. You drink anyway, fighting the urge to spit it back. The pennies are, perhaps, imaginary. The plague is not. Dysentery lurks in every drop, a microscopic lottery you can't afford to lose. You've heard the stories, men who died, emptied from the inside out, dehydrated by their own bodies, desperate attempts to expel infection. You finish and pray to the patron saint of questionable liquids, hoping your gut flora has frontier fortitude. The water vendor wipes your cup with a rag dirtier than most mining operations, ready for the next customer, desperate enough not to look too closely. He catches your expression and grins, revealing teeth gone to war with neglect and losing badly. Got better if you got better money, he offers, tapping a small flask tucked inside his vest. This here's clean as a parson's conscience. Spring water, he lowers his voice to a conspiratorial whisper from up in the high country. Snow melt. You consider your remaining coins, weighing hydration against starvation, and reluctantly decline. The man shrugs, unsurprised, and turns his attention to a potential customer with a fatter purse approaching from down the street. Commerce, like water, flows toward money. Dusk ambushes the heat, painting the sky in bruises, purples and deep blues spreading from the eastern horizon, while the west still burns orange. The temperature drops with surprising speed, the desert releasing the day's accumulation as though exhaling after long restraint. You shiver, despite yourself, your sweat-damp shirt now a conductor for the evening's chill. The town transforms with the lights changing. Lamps are lit inside windows, their yellow glow creating islands of warmth in the gathering darkness. The saloon awakens fully, piano music spilling into the street, along with raucous laughter and the occasional crash of breaking glass. Men who worked through the scorching day now seek evening recreation with the same single-minded focus. You drag yourself toward the boarding house, a two-story structure that appears to be losing a slow-motion wrestling match with gravity. A sign in the window advertises clean beds. By the TDC through which you read it calls at least half that claim into question. Still, a roof and walls beat open sky when night brings plummeting temperatures. The landlady greets you with a grin missing more teeth than it keeps. Her face is a topographical map of hard living, deep creases running from nose to mouth, crow's feet radiating from eyes that have witnessed a lifetime of disappointments. Her hair pulled back in a severe bun might once have been brown, but now exists in that colorless state that precedes white. She wears a dress that might have been fashionable during Polk's administration, patched at the elbows and fraying at the collar. 50 cents. She announces, without preamble, $1 if you want breakfast, $1.50 if you want clean sheets. Her voice has the rough edges of a woman who shouts to be heard and drinks to forget. She charges double if you ask for sheets, so you don't ask. You count out coins into her palm, feeling wealth drain away like water and sand. She examines each piece as though suspecting counterfeit before dropping them into a pocket hidden in her skirt's voluminous folds. Room 5. Up the stairs, end of the hall. She hands you a key attached to a wooden block large enough to discourage theft by making it impossible to slip into a pocket unnoticed. Washrooms down the hall. No smoking in bed, no women in rooms, no refunds if you die overnight. You climb the narrow stairs, each tread complaining in termite-weakened protest beneath your weight. The banister wobbles when you grasp it, offering more psychological than physical support. The upper hallway stretches before you, lit by a single oil lamp that casts more shadow than illumination. Doors line both sides, some close tight, others ajar enough to release snores or muttered conversations. Room 5 is coffin-shaped, smelling of old breath and cedar oil. A narrow bed occupies most of the available floor space, its mattress showing the permanent depression of countless previous occupants. A small table stands beside it, bearing a chipped pitcher and basin. The single window is covered by a curtain, so thin it seems more suggestion than barrier, and through it you see the dim shapes of rooftops against the darkening sky. You sit on the bed, something scuttles out from the pillow, a large insect, or perhaps a small rodent, disappearing into a crack in the floorboards. You pretend you didn't see. Some knowledge doesn't improve situations. The mattress crackles beneath you, stuffed with straw or corn husks that have seen better days and several generations of travelers. You pour water from the pitcher into the basin and wash your face, the liquid turning immediately gray with the dust you've accumulated. It feels like heaven against your skin, even as you try not to think about its source or the last time the basin was properly cleaned. You drink directly from the pitcher afterward, thirst overriding caution. Night is loud, dogs barking at drunks, drunks barking at ghosts, coyotes negotiating the moon's position with high lonely cries. Through the thin walls come snippets of neighboring lives, a man's deep cough that speaks of miner's lung, a woman's quiet weeping, someone reciting what might be prayers or might be curses. The boundary between the two seems especially thin tonight. You lie awake, counting gunshots like sheep. Verse 1 at 9, a sharp crack, followed by shouts too distant to interpret, then a burst at 11, 3 shots in rapid succession, either celebration or confrontation, impossible to determine which. A solitary report near midnight, close enough to make the window glass vibrate in its frame. Each retort echoes through your ribs, a percussion of violence that forms the heartbeat of this place. You remind yourself that you wanted adventure. Adventure laughs through the bullet holes in your ceiling. Actual bullet holes, you realize, examining the splintered indentations in the rough-hewn planks above. Someone's past drama has left its mark, lead testimony to passions or grudges now forgotten. Sleep comes in fragments, broken by unfamiliar sounds and the persistent attacks of bedbugs that apparently consider your arrival a feast day. You dream of water, oceans, lakes, rivers flowing clear and cold. You wake repeatedly, thirsty and disoriented, reaching for canteens that aren't there. The mattress whispers with every movement, restless as you are, speaking in the language of insomnia. Outside, the town continues its nocturnal existence. Piano music rises and falls from the saloon. Occasional shouts punctuate the darkness. Somewhere a baby cries with the persistent desperation of the very young. Life continues, heedless of your comfort or concern. Morning comes too soon, and not soon enough. Light seeps around the inadequate curtain, painting a bright rectangle on the opposite wall. The room's sparse furnishings emerge from shadow. The washstand with its dented pitcher, a 3-legged stool in the corner, a row of hooks on the wall, where previous occupants have left their marks in scattered nails and pocket knife initials. You smell bacon and hope, both faint, both distant. Your stomach responds with interest, reminding you that yesterday's mystery meat has long since been processed. You dress quickly, splashing more water on your face and running wet fingers through hair gone wild with dust and sleep. The mirror above the washstand, spotted with age and neglect, reflects a stranger with your features, sun-darkened skin, eyes bloodshot from poor rest, the beginnings of frontier beard shadowing your jaw. Downstairs in the dining room, the landlady slaps a plate in front of you, 2 eggs that died resentful, their yolks broken and spreading across the cracked china like yellow accusations. Beside them lies bacon grayer than your conscience, 3 strips curled like question marks. A chunk of bread has been cut with more force than precision, its edges ragged where the knife tore rather than sliced. Coffee thick enough to pave roads sits in a mug with a chip so substantial it qualifies as a design feature rather than damage. You eat because refusing food here is heresy. In a land where starvation rides beside every wagon, where winter means isolation and summer means spoilage, only a fool or a dying man turns away calories. The eggs taste strongly of chicken, barely transformed from their origin. The bacon is saltier than the Dead Sea, but provides the fat your body craves after yesterday's exertions. The bread is 3 days short of petrification, but softens somewhat when dipped in the coffee. Halfway through this nutritional adventure, a patron at the next table coughs blood into his napkin, folds it neat, and keeps eating as though nothing unusual has occurred. Hygiene is for future centuries and more forgiving landscapes. Here, a man continues until he can't, and acknowledging weakness is more taboo than spitting on hallowed ground. Around you, other guests attack their identical breakfasts with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Most are men, trail hands, prospectors, drifters like yourself, but a few women occupy corners of the room, their clothing marking them as either respectable widows or working girls between shifts. Conversation is minimal, focused on practical matters, weather predictions, trail conditions, rumors of strikes or raids, or opportunities. You overhear miners bragging about striking silver in the hills west of town. They chew tobacco until the spittoon overflows, and still dream of shining fortunes plucked from reluctant earth. Their hands are permanently darkened, nails broken and black with more than dirt. They describe tunnels barely wide enough for a man's shoulders, shafts that descend hundreds of feet into darkness, lit only by guttering candles, the constant threat of cave-ins or poison gas. Got a vein thick as my arm, one claims, forearm raised to demonstrate, running pure through blue-black warts. She's gonna make us rich, as Croesus. His companions nod, eyes alight with the fever that drives men underground for months at a time. You picture yourself in their place, hunched in tunnels where sunlight never reaches, candles sputtering, lungs filling with quartz dust and fatal optimism. You quietly cross mining off your mental list of potential frontier careers. Some dreams aren't worth their cost in daylight. Instead, you wander toward the outskirts where homesteaders cling to parched soil, scratching subsistence from land that gives nothing willingly. Small cabins and sod houses dot the landscape, each surrounded by pathetic attempts at gardens or corrals containing livestock, thin as hope. Children with sun-bleached hair pause in their chores to watch you pass, their eyes holding the weariness of those born to hardship. A woman in a sun-bleached dress swings an axe, reducing mesquite to toothpicks with mechanical precision. Her movements are economical, practiced, each strike exactly as powerful as needed. No energy wasted, no motion without purpose. Her baby cries from a sling across her chest, but the axe never stops its rhythm. The infant's wailing is just another sound in an environment that offers no breaks, no respite. You pause, watching her work with grudging admiration. This close to town, firewood becomes a precious commodity, gathered, hoarded, sometimes stolen. The mesquite she chops is wizened, its roots having driven down dozens of feet to find moisture in this arid soil. The wood is dense, stubborn, fighting the axe as it fought the desert, but the woman's determination is greater than its resistance. You offer help, she snorts, wiping sweat across her cheek with a forearm as muscled as your ego isn't. The sound contains multitudes, amusement, derision, weary acceptance of yet another man, assuming she needs assistance. Her eyes, when they meet yours, are clear as creek water and just as uncompromising. You know how to swing an axe, city man? She asks, the baby still fussing against her chest. Without taking off your own foot, before you can answer, she tells you the prairie doesn't care about chivalry, only yield. Weather, drought, predators, disease, none wait for male intervention or pause for feminine weakness. The land demands equal sacrifice from all who claim it. She's buried 2 husbands and a child already, and neither tears nor promises made the digging easier. You step back, chastened by competence. Her assessment was instant and accurate. Your hands show no calluses from axe handles. Your stance betrays no familiarity with the tool's balance. You're pretending at frontier life while she embodies it, and both of you know the difference. Want to be useful? She asks, pausing long enough to shift the baby to her other hip. Fetch water from the creek yonder. 2 buckets by the door. Don't waste a drop. You accept this assignment with more enthusiasm than skill, lifting the wooden buckets with handles worn smooth by years of similar journeys. The creek lies a quarter-mile distant, a pitiful trickle between cracked banks that suggests a more impressive flow in wetter seasons. You fill the buckets carefully, noting how insects skate across the surface, and small fish dart in the deeper pools. Life, persistent, even here. The walk back is harder, water sloshing with each step, handles cutting into your palms. By the time you return, half of each bucket's contents has decorated your pants and boots. The woman says nothing about the waste, just nods toward a large barrel beside her door where you deposit your delivery. She offers no thanks, but when you turn to leave, she hands you a piece of jerky, tough as leather, salty as tears, sustaining as her determination. Next time, she says, already turning back to a woodpile, carry the buckets farther apart, balances the load, spills less. It's the closest thing to approval you're likely to receive, and somehow it means more than effusive praise might elsewhere. You chew the jerky as you walk back toward town, its resistance, a reminder of what survival requires here: persistence, adaptation, and the humility to learn from those who've already paid tuition to the territory's harsh schooling. The wind shifts, bringing stench from the slaughterhouse at the settlement's opposite edge. You follow it, masochist, or simply curious, navigating by smell alone, until you reach a sprawling structure of weathered planks, its yard churned to mud, despite the general drought. The aroma is complex and awful: blood, awful, boiling fat, wet hair, fierce sweat, and the sweet sick undertone of early decomposition. You watch cowhides peeled like fruit, the systematic disassembly of animals into their component parts. Men in aprons stiff with dried blood wield knives faster than thought, singing to drown the screams. Their songs are old country ballads, love lyrics rendered surreal by the backdrop of industrial death. Their hands never slow, never hesitate, following patterns established through years of repetition. Blood sluices into trenches where pigs root for scraps, their enthusiastic grunting a counterpoint to the workers' songs. Nothing wasted, everything used: hide for leather, meat for food, bones for buttons and tools, even the blood collected for fertilizer and manufacturing. The frontier cannot afford the luxury of squeamishness. You feel your breakfast protest: the smell, the sounds, the casual efficiency with which life is transformed into commodity. It's overwhelming to uninitiated senses. One worker notices your pallor and jokes that you'll toughen up or wash out. He's missing 2 fingers on his left hand, the stumps healed to smooth nubs that suggest the occupation's hazards. First day's the worst. He calls over his shoulder, returning to the carcass before him. By week's end, you'll be eating lunch while standing in steaming guts, or you'll be gone. You consider washing out. You consider washing, period. Then you remember water costs more than whiskey, and even that is beyond your current means. You retreat from the slaughterhouse, its lessons in mortality and commerce sufficiently absorbed for one day. Speaking of which, the saloon calls again. It's noon, hottest part of hell, and half the town seeks oblivion behind swinging doors. You join them, stepping from blinding sunlight into a dimness that momentarily renders you blind. The contrast is jolting, from desiccating heat to relative cool, from relentless brightness to a gloom broken only by scattered lamps and the occasional shaft of sunlight penetrating holes in the roof. Inside it's dim, smoky, loud. Piano thumps, a ragged tune in the corner, played by a man whose talent suggests he might once have performed in finer establishments back east. Now he hammers at yellowed keys, coaxing something resembling music from an instrument that was probably last tuned during the previous administration. His left hand keeps rhythm, while his right finds melody, and his foot works a pedal with the determination of someone pumping for survival. A card game bleeds payroll at a corner table, 5 men hunched over their hands, with expressions ranging from careful blankness to poorly concealed excitement. Chips and coins form miniature fortifications before each player, the stacks rising and falling with each hand's resolution. A particularly large pot draws spectators, their commentary adding to the room's general cacophony. You order whiskey because it's safer than water. Typhoid doesn't survive in alcohol, and while cirrhosis is a concern, it's a future problem in a place where the present demands immediate attention. The bartender, a mountain of a man with arms thick as fence posts and a scar bisecting one eyebrow, slides a glass that may have been wiped since the Civil War, but evidence suggests otherwise. You down it in one blistering sigh, a technique perfected by men in a hurry to forget, or numb, or both. Fire erupts down your throat, cleans you out like prayer, scouring away doubt and hesitation and a lingering taste of questionable breakfast. It's not good whiskey, barely whiskey at all, more akin to industrial solvent with amber coloring, but it accomplishes its primary mission, sensation without thought. The bartender raises an eyebrow, silently inquiring if you'd like another. You shake your head, acutely aware of your remaining funds. 1 drink is medicine, 2 is luxury. He shrugs, already turning to serve the next customer, your brief transaction already forgotten. The saloon's clientele forms a cross-section of frontier society, cowboys between drives, miners between shifts, gamblers between towns, and men whose occupations aren't immediately apparent and probably shouldn't be discussed in polite company. Their conversations overlap in a tapestry of complaint, boasting, speculation, and the occasional burst of laughter that sounds more like challenge than amusement. In one corner, 2 men argue over the correct method for braking a Mustang, one advocating patience and gradual pressure, the other championing a more direct approach involving ropes and determination. Their disagreement grows heated, voices rising above the general din, until the bartender raps a wooden mallet against the counter. The sound cuts through the noise like a gunshot, and both men subside, taking their disagreement outside where it will either dissipate or escalate beyond words. The card table, a winning hand is revealed, met with groans from losers and a satisfied smirk from the victor. A thin man with a pencil mustache and fingers that move with suspicious dexterity. As he rakes in his winnings, you notice how his eyes never stop moving, constantly assessing exits and other players. He's not local. His suit is too fine, his boots too unmolested by the elements, and he carries himself with the professional wariness of someone who never plays the same room twice. You turn to leave, having witnessed enough for 1 hour, when a commotion at the door draws all attention. The saloon falls abruptly silent, conversation stopping mid-word, the piano trailing off in an uncertain diminuendo. 3 men enter, trail dust, still clinging to their clothes, spurs jingling with each step. Their leader, a hulking figure with a hat pulled low over cold eyes, scans the room with predatory focus. Whiskey, he growls to the bartender, who complies with unusual speed, setting up 3 glasses without discussing payment. The newcomers drain their drinks in perfect unison, like a practice drill, then slam the glasses down with unnecessary force. A name ripples through the room in whispers, Carson Brothers. The atmosphere shifts from general revelry to specific tension. These men have reputation, the kind that clears paths and conversations. You edge toward the exit, sensing that proximity to such individuals rarely improves one's health statistics. Before you can make your escape, the leader's gaze lands on you, the obvious outsider, the unknown quantity. He assesses you with the casual contempt of a wolf eyeing a particularly uninspiring rabbit. "Ain't seen you around," he states, voice pitched to carry. It's not a question, merely an observation that demands explanation. You mumble something about passing through, searching for opportunity, the usual platitudes of the drifter. He continues staring, unblinking as a snake, then abruptly loses interest, turning back to his brothers and the business of systematically emptying the bottle the bartender has wisely provided. You exit quickly, pulse hammering in your throat, aware that you've just experienced what passes for mercy in this environment. Outside, the sun strikes like physical assault after the saloon's dimness. You blink, momentarily blinded, and stumble directly into the path of another newcomer to town. Evening brings a traveling preacher to the street corner, Bible in one hand, shotgun in the other, insurance for salvation. He's a gaunt figure in a coat too heavy for the climate, but appropriately somber for his calling. White collar bright against black broadcloth, hat battered but maintaining a desperate dignity, eyes burning with the peculiar fervor of men who've looked into eternity and come away singed. He warns of hellfire while stagecoaches thunder past, flinging mud on his congregation of 3 bewildered children and a goat. His voice rises above the clatter of wheels and hoofbeats, prophecies of damnation competing with the more immediate sounds of commerce and transportation. The children listen with expressions suggesting they're present under duress rather than spiritual hunger. The goat chews contemplatively on the corner of a wanted poster nailed to a nearby post. You marvel at the multitasking, repent, or God will reload. The shotgun, resting in the crook of the preacher's arm, isn't an idle threat, but a practical concession to an environment where even divine protection requires ballistic supplementation. The wages of sin is death. The preacher howls, finger-jabbing skyward for emphasis, and this territory pays wages regular as any railroad. The stagecoach, incidentally, is your imagined ticket out. You watch it lumber through town, an ungainly vessel that somehow represents civilization despite its crude construction and dubious comfort. 6 horses strain in harness, coached by a driver whose face has been weathered to leather by years of exposure. Beside him sits a guard, shotgun across his knees, eyes constantly scanning surroundings for the threat of bandits or hostile natives. The stage pauses outside what passes for the local station, a lean-to attached to the general store where passengers can purchase tickets and mail letters that may or may not reach their destinations. You approach, inquiring about passage to anywhere more hospitable than here. The ticket agent, a dyspeptic man with ink-stained fingers and permanent frown lines, quotes prices that make your remaining funds seem laughably inadequate. You price seats, $30, no guarantee of arrival, high probability of robbery, weather exposure included. You have $5 and change. The math is bleak. The agent looks at you with the pity reserved for children who've just discovered Santa Claus is fiction. Could ride up top with the driver, he offers, not unkindly, $15, but you're responsible for your own safety. Company don't pay for funerals if Indians take your hair. You resign to staying for now, and by resign you mean mentally draft a will. The agent shrugs, already turning to the next customer, a well-dressed woman with a carpet bag that suggests means beyond your own. You watch her purchase passage with enviable ease, counting out coins that would represent weeks of labor for most inhabitants of this dusty outpost. Disease waits backstage, patient as a career understudy. Town gossip says smallpox rode in last week on a freight wagon from the south, the driver showing telltale signs before collapsing outside the general store Talk at the water barrel dwells on symptoms and prognosis with the ghoulish fascination of those who live intimately with mortality. You touch your face automatically, counting hypothetical pustules. Your skin feels hot, but whether from actual fever or the day's relentless sun is impossible to determine. Every ache, every twinge becomes suspect, potential harbinger of impending biological disaster. The doctor, one saddlebag of dirty bandages and a burn sore, charges $10 for advice. Don't get sick. His office, such as it is, occupies a back room of the apothecary, separated from the main shop by a curtain that may once have been white, but now exists in a spectrum between grey and defeat. The examining table is a plank door laid across two barrels. His instruments rest in a leather roll that's seen better decades. You thank him for the insight, recognizing that frontier medicine operates on principles more pragmatic than scientific. He offers vaccination, extending a needle that looks suspiciously like it might have previous careers in darning socks, or perhaps minor surgery on livestock. His alcohol supply sits in a brown bottle labeled a medicinal, though you suspect it doubled as whiskey yesterday and might serve as lamp fuel tomorrow. You decline. Gambling. On luck. Luck blinks. Unimpressed. Outside the doctor's establishment, you encounter the aftermath of someone whose wager with probability ended less favorably. A woman weeps over a small bundle wrapped in what might be a kitchen towel, her grief raw and public in a place where stoicism is currency. The bundle's size suggests an infant, its stillness confirming worst fears. The doctor emerges briefly, pats the woman's shoulder with awkward compassion, then retreats inside, already focused on the next crisis in an endless procession. Death here isn't tragedy, but expectation, the background condition against which life temporarily asserts itself. Children die of fevers that modern medicine will someday render inconvenient rather than fatal. Women die in childbirth, men in accidents or violence, or the slow accumulation of mineral dust in unforgiving lungs. The graveyard outside town grows with the steady inevitability of the sunset. Days blur. You chop wood for pennies, muck stables for nickels, learn that blistered hands are the West's handshake. Work is constant, but employment fleeting. A day here unloading freight, half a day there helping the blacksmith pump bellows until your shoulders scream protest. You sleep where opportunity allows another night at the boarding house, when funds permit, a pile of hay in the livery stable when they don't, once even beneath the boardwalk when all other options failed. You watch as a gambler loses everything, including the shirt off his back, literally, and staggers into the night half naked, half mad. His descent wasn't sudden but methodical, a slow-motion avalanche of bad decisions and worse luck. First his money, then his watch, then his boots, and finally the clothes he stood in, each item wagered with increasing desperation, as though the next hand must certainly reverse his fortunes. The other players showed neither mercy nor particular greed, simply the mechanical efficiency of those who understand probability better than their opponent. You share eye contact with a rattlesnake coiled beneath the boardwalk during one of your less comfortable nights. Its gaze is cool, assessing, devoid of malice, but rich with potential consequence. You both decide diplomacy is best today. It retreats deeper into shadow. You roll quietly in the opposite direction. Mutual recognition of territorial boundaries averts conflict, a lesson the human populace might benefit from studying. The days assume rhythm, if not comfort. You rise with the sun, because there's little reason to remain horizontal once light penetrates whatever shelter you've secured. Breakfast is whatever can be afforded or scavenged, sometimes coffee and biscuits at the boarding house, sometimes a piece of jerky traded for labor, occasionally nothing but water and determination. Hunger becomes less an emergency and more a companion, a constant presence acknowledged but not indulged. Survival requires adaptation. You learn to spit like locals, a distant skill that communicates everything from casual boredom to imminent violence, depending on trajectory and target. You adopt the peculiar gait of frontier men, a loose-hipped swagger that accommodates uneven ground and minimizes boot wear. Your speech shifts, dropping formal constructions and unnecessary syllables, embracing the economical grammar of those who save words like ammunition. Sunday dawns, and the bell rings for church, in a half-finished frame building missing 2 walls. The structure is aspirational, part existing edifice, part architectural promissory note. Canvas stretches across gaps where windows will someday be, if the congregation's fortunes improve or divine intervention includes carpentry. The bell itself hangs from a simple wooden frame beside the building, rung by a rope frayed from enthusiastic devotion. Congregants dress in their least dirty clothes, outfits brushed and mended for the occasion. Women don bonnets saved from dust in precious dresser drawers. Men struggle into jackets with collars that chafe unaccustomed necks. They file in with expressions solemn yet hopeful, as though the act of gathering might confer protection against the week's accumulated hardships. You join, mouthing words you barely know, because community might be the only medicine stronger than rotgut. The hymns are familiar enough, standards that have followed civilization's ragged edge westward, their melodies carrying comfort across mountains and deserts. Amazing Grace, Rock of Ages, Shall We Gather at the River, songs that speak of redemption and rest to people intimate with neither. For 1 hour, hearts beat in unison. The preacher, a circuit rider, serving 6 communities across 3 counties, delivers a sermon balancing damnation and salvation in proportions calibrated for maximum motivation. His voice rises and falls like the landscape itself, now thunderous with righteous fury, now gentle with divine promise. The congregation responds with murmurs of amen and yes, Lord, collective affirmation in a world that offers little certainty. Then the service ends, and a fistfight erupts over land rights. The combatants, members of neighboring families with competing claims to a spring, exchange blows on consecrated ground, while the preacher attempts intervention. Their dispute is older than the town itself, a generation's deep grudge, watered by blood and sustained by pride. You step aside, hymn fading on your tongue, witnessing the swift transition from community to conflict. Later, rain finally arrives, an event crowned in myth and celebration. Dark clouds bruise the sky, piling high like celestial mountains. Thunder grumbles like distant cannons, warning shots across heaven's bow. The air grows dense, expectant, carrying the metallic tang of imminent precipitation. Shopkeepers pause, mid-transaction to glance skyward. Children abandon games to watch nature's theater unfold. The first fat drops pound dust into mud, each impact releasing the desert's hidden perfume, sage, mineral, promise. Children dance barefoot, shrieking joy, faces upturned to catch blessing on their tongues. Adults set out barrels, buckets, pots, pans, anything that might capture liquid wealth falling freely from above. Some remove hats, despite social convention, letting water baptize sun-baked scalps in primitive gratitude. You join them, letting rain cut tracks through filth on your skin. Days of accumulated grime surrender to this unexpected shower, carrying away dust, and with it, briefly, the weight of transplantation. The sensation is beyond luxury. Cool rivulets tracing pathways down your neck, soaking your shirt until the fabric clings like a second skin. It is wholly beyond language, this cleansing that costs nothing, yet gives everything. Then lightning strikes the telegraph pole at the edge of town, a blinding flash followed by explosion as wood splinters in all directions. Sparks shower across the street, igniting a pile of straw beside the livery. Men rush to extinguish the nascent fire, while others assess damage to the communication line. You remember nature here is both gift and executioner, its bounty never without consequence. Mud transforms roads into quicksand, wagons sink to axles, stranded like wooden islands in a sea of earthen soup. Horses flounder, hooves finding no purchase in the treacherous surface that yesterday was solid ground. Travel halts, commerce pauses, and the town turns inward, a collective hunker against nature's liquid assault. The rain continues through the night, alternating between gentle patter and wrathful downpour. Roofs designed for aridity reveal their inadequacies. Leaks develop, first as isolated drips, then as persistent streams that require strategic placement of pots and pans. You sleep in the stable loft, relatively dry, among hay bales that smell of summer, despite the surrounding deluge. But after the downpour stops, everything feels possible again. The air is washed clean, each breath a revelation after weeks of dust-laden respiration. Colors intensify, the weathered gray of buildings, now darker with moisture, the few stunted trees suddenly vibrant green. Even the sky seems more definitively blue, as though rain has polished the very air. Then mosquitoes hatch by the millions, carriers of malarial nightmares. They rise from puddles and ruts, from water barrels and horse troughs, a humming cloud of hunger that descends on the town with collective purpose. No time of day provides respite. They attack at dawn, noon, dusk, and through the darkness, their whining presence, a constant reminder of nature's persistence. You scratch one bite, then 10, then swear allegiance to antihistamines that won't exist for another 80 years. The welts rise on your skin like tiny volcanoes, each one an itching testament to the frontier's determination to make even blessings carry cost. Veterans of the region burn smudge pots filled with green wood and dung, creating a choking smoke that's only marginally preferable to the insects it repels. The days grow shorter, shadows lengthening earlier each evening. Winter sidles in under a moonless sky, not with dramatic snow, but with a biting wind that slices through clothing designed for other seasons. Cold here is a hungry animal, gnawing through boots, coats, bone. It finds every gap in construction, every hole in fabric, every exposed patch of skin, with unerring precision. The boarding house stove burns dung, because wood is scarce, and dung is, tragically, plentiful. Cattle and horse droppings, collected and dried throughout the year, now serve as primary fuel source for the settlement. The smell is a war crime, acrid, pervasive, clinging to clothing and hair with tenacious chemistry. But heat trumps olfactory sensibilities, and gathering around the stove becomes evening ritual despite its aromatic deficiencies. You curl beneath blankets stiff as bark, breath pluming above your face like smoke signals for rescue. None comes. The blankets, threadbare wool with occasional patches of mysterious origin, provide minimal insulation against night temperatures that flirt with freezing. Sleep comes in snatches, interrupted by the need to restore circulation to extremities, threatening mutiny. Food turns ration thin. The rain that seemed salvation now reveals its treachery. Wagon trails remain impassable, preventing supply deliveries. The general store rations its remaining stock, selling smaller portions at higher prices as basic economic principles assert themselves. Salt pork and beans. On repeat, until your dreams taste briny. Vitamin deficiency paints your gums scarlet, a warning sign recognized too late by men who considered vegetables optional rather than essential. A dentist arrives on the Christmas stagecoach, traveling between isolated communities like a circuit-riding preacher of pain. His portable chair sets up in the barber shop, transforming the space from grooming center to medical facility, with the addition of a leather case containing instruments, medieval in appearance and application. No anesthesia beyond whiskey, no sterilization beyond a quick wipe with alcohol. Dental care consists primarily of extraction rather than repair. He leaves 2 weeks later with more extracted teeth than there are people in town, his pockets heavy with payment, his ledger full of debits against future visits. You cling to yours out of sheer paranoia, brushing with salt and soda when available, chewing willow twigs when not, avoiding the dentist chair through diligence and luck rather than actual dental health. Christmas passes with minimal acknowledgement, a special service in the still unfinished church, a slightly more ambitious dinner at the boarding house, featuring actual dried fruit in the pudding, perhaps an extra ration of whiskey at the saloon. No trees are decorated, few gifts exchanged. The holiday exists as remembrance rather than celebration, a marker of time's passage rather than festive indulgence. Come thaw, cattle drives thunder past, endless hooves, dust clouds thick enough to blind saints. The herds stretch for miles, thousands of animals moving as a single organism under the guidance of men who spend more time with livestock than humans. Cowboys holler, cracking whips, faces hidden beneath brim shadows turned anonymous by distance and purpose. They are mythology in motion, romantic from afar, filthy and exhausted up close, occupying that peculiar space between legend and reality that defines much of frontier existence. They sleep in the saddle, urinate from the saddle, occasionally die in the saddle. Their lives are circumscribed by the herd's needs, constant vigilance against predators, both four-legged, and two, awareness of grazing requirements, the perpetual search for water sources that won't poison their charges. You watch them fade into horizon haze, and wonder what phantoms tug their reins, what interior landscapes they traverse during endless days of external monotony. The cattle perfume the air with their passing, a rich, organic stink that clings to everything for days afterward. The sound of their movement continues in memory, even after they've gone, the creak of leather, the lowing of confused calves, the constant percussion of thousands of hooves striking earth simultaneously. It is commerce, made flesh, future steaks and roasts, walking themselves to market hundreds of miles distant. Law arrives next in the form of a circuit judge swollen with righteous fatigue. His buggy rolls into town one April morning, springs protesting the combination of rutted roads and judicial bulk. The man himself emerges like a whale breaching, massive, deliberate, exuding authority that has nothing to do with the star-patterned badge pinned to his ample chest, and everything to do with the letter of appointment signed by the territorial governor. Court convenes in the saloon because the church leaks and the town hall burned down during last year's 4th of July fiasco involving amateur pyrotechnics and professional stupidity. Tables are pushed aside, a makeshift bench established at one end of the room, the bar itself serving as bailiff station. The transformation from den of iniquity to hall of justice is accomplished with remarkable efficiency, suggesting this is not the first time such adaptation has occurred. 12 jurors sip whiskey, while testimonies slur across the bar. They are a cross-section of local citizenry, ranchers with sun-squinted eyes, shopkeepers with accounts to settle, one school teacher whose spectacles keep sliding down a nose, narrowed by academic disappointment. They listen with varying degrees of attention as witness after witness climbs onto a chair to deliver testimony, each sworn in on a Bible that has seen more hands than pages. A defendant pleads innocence. The bartender testifies otherwise, recalling with bartender's memory exactly how many drinks were consumed and which insults were exchanged before violence erupted. The accused, a cowhand with a face that suggests frequent rearrangement, claims self-defense and poor recollection, a combination rarely successful in any judicial system. The jury deliberates by staring into their glasses, occasionally exchanging muttered comments that have as much to do with the quality of the whiskey as the quality of the evidence. Their deliberation lasts approximately as long as it takes to finish their drinks, suggesting either remarkable cognitive efficiency or profound indifference to jurisprudential nuance. Verdict: guilty-ish. The foreman delivers this assessment with a philosophical shrug that encompasses the moral ambiguity of frontier justice and his personal ambivalence about the proceedings. The judge, who has been working his way through legal documents and beef jerky with equal determination, accepts this conclusion with a nod that sets his jowls in motion. Sentence: pay the bartender's tab and leave before sundown. Justice served with ice, at least figuratively. The defendant appears relieved. The sentence could certainly be worse, given the jurisdiction's fondness for hanging as solution to various social ills. He counts out coins with shaking hands, accepts his banishment with surprising grace, and exits to gather whatever possessions remain before the deadline. The court continues through its docket: boundary disputes, livestock theft, assault charges, one count of malicious destruction of postal correspondence that elicits particular judicial disapproval. Each case receives approximately 15 minutes of consideration before judgment is rendered, and the next major factor called forward. By sundown, the saloon has generated more revenue through legal proceedings than it typically manages during a normal business day. As evening approaches, the judge concludes court with a bang of his gavel that nearly shatters the bar top. He rises ponderously, gathering his papers with the air of a man who has performed his duty and now intends to seek liquid compensation for such virtue. The transformation back to saloon begins immediately. Tables return to position, spittoons relocated to their customary corners, piano player emerging from whatever hole he occupied during daylight hours. Railroad rumors sweep through like plague and prophet combined. Word arrives via telegraph, the line now repaired after its lightning encounter, that track is being laid from the east, advancing at the rate of several miles per week when conditions permit. The news electrifies the town. Property values fluctuate wildly. Speculation becomes primary occupation. Everyone from the banker to the blacksmith recalculates their future with steel rails as the new mathematical constant. Engineers drive stakes, survey land, promise steel veins that will connect the speck to the beating heart of elsewhere. They arrive with instruments of precise measurement, theodolites, levels, chains, and the absolute confidence of men whose calculations reshape landscapes. In their wake come lawyers with documents requiring signatures, offering payments that seem generous until compared with the potential value once rails arrive. Local merchants dream of prosperity. Local bandits dream of train robberies. Both see opportunity in steam and schedule, in the regular arrival of passengers and goods from distant markets. You imagine a future where travel doesn't guarantee death. For a moment hope feels almost legal, a permitted emotion in a place that generally favors pragmatism over optimism. The railroad men bring news of the larger world, presidential politics, Eastern fashions, innovations that haven't yet penetrated this far into the continent's interior. They speak casually of events that seem as remote as celestial movements to those who measure excitement in bar fights and successful harvests. These men are emissaries from a reality that exists independent of drought and dust, where time is measured by clocks rather than seasons, where progress is expected rather than extraordinary. Then workers arrive, Irish immigrants with accents thick as stew, Chinese laborers with queues hanging down their backs, former slaves seeking wages rather than bondage. They establish camps outside town, small cities of canvas and necessity that follow the advancing rail line like remora trailing sharks. Their presence doubles the local population overnight, straining resources already stretched thin by geography and climate. They work from dawn beyond dusk, hammering and dynamiting through mountains no man should bother. The sound of construction becomes the town's new heartbeat. Regular explosions, the metallic ring of sledgehammers on spikes, the curses in multiple languages that accompany human exertion against indifferent stone. They move earth by hand and by black powder, reshaping the land with the focused determination of those building future on insufficient food and minimal sleep. Explosions echo night and day. A tunnel through particularly resistant stone progresses inches at a time, each advance purchased with sweat and calculated risk. Inside the mountain, air grows thick with rock dust and the lingering vapors of explosive residue. Men work by lantern light, their faces ghostly in the weak illumination, their lungs collecting silicosis with each breath. A tunnel collapses, burying 20 souls. The accident occurs without warning, a misplaced charge perhaps, or a geological weakness undetected by engineers. The mountain reclaims its substance, leaving only a cloud of dust and a silence that speaks louder than the preceding explosion. The foreman shrugs, schedule above sorrow. Replacement workers are already boarding trains further east, unaware they're being recruited to fill graves as well as positions. You help dig with blistered hands until bodies surface, faces serene in eternal clock-out. The recovery effort continues through the night, lanterns illuminating a tragedy that technological progress demands as sacrifice. Some bodies emerge intact, others require imagination to reassemble. All are laid in a row beside the tunnel entrance, each covered with canvas, until identification can be attempted. No minister is present to offer final prayers. The circuit rider won't return for weeks. Instead, one of the Irish foremen reads from a dog-eared Bible, his brogue transforming ancient text into something immediate and personal. The dead are buried in a common grave, marked with a wooden cross that will likely weather away before any relatives can visit. You realize progress demands blood as down payment, a cost calculated into budgets and schedules with cold arithmetic. You write a letter home, ink blotched by trembling cold, and tell half-truths. You're thriving. Opportunity abounds. America is vast and generous. The words form on paper with painful deliberation, each sentence a negotiation between truth and the need to present frontier life as something other than endured hardship. You describe the landscape in terms that suggest majesty rather than menace. Speak of prospects instead of survival. Mention the coming railroad as though it's salvation certain rather than promised mirage. You omit the part where you count coffin nails like rosary beads, where you fall asleep to the sound of coyotes discussing your mortality, where you've learned to distinguish various types of pain as though mastering a new language. You don't mention how you've grown accustomed to the taste of alkaline water, the constant abrasion of dust against skin, the peculiar loneliness that comes from being surrounded by people, yet connected to none. The postmaster charges 2 bits, and warns bandits might intercept the mail. The price seems excessive for transmission of paper and ink, but distance creates its own economy. The warning is delivered with casual certainty, not to frighten, but to establish realistic expectations. Mail coaches are targets, like any other valuable transport, their contents ransacked for money orders or items of worth. Letters are usually left behind, trampled into dirt or scattered by wind, their contents of interest only to their intended recipients. You pay anyway, because lies deserve audiences, especially those we tell to protect others from worrying about circumstances beyond their control. The postmaster, a thin man with ink-stained fingers, and the perpetually disappointed expression of one who handles others' correspondence but rarely receives his own, stamps the envelope and adds it to a canvas sack already bulging with similar missives. Whether it will reach its destination is a gamble like everything else here, possible, but far from certain. Spring again, and with it come traveling performers, a snake oil salesman, promising cures for heartbreak and hemorrhoids. He arrives in a wagon painted garishly, with claims of medical miracle. The vehicle itself, a monument to hyperbolized hope. The man matches his conveyance, suit too colorful for conservative tastes, mustache waxed to defiant points, voice projection suggesting theatrical training rather than medical education. He sets up beside the general store, establishing a small stage from folding platforms carried in his wagon's storage compartments. A banner stretches above Professor Thaddeus J. Wonderkind's miraculous elixir of life. The professor himself arranges bottles of amber liquid on a cloth-draped table, each bearing labels promising relief from ailments ranging from rheumatism to female hysteria to nervous exhaustion of modern living. His patter is practiced to perfection, a symphony of pseudo-scientific jargon and folksy wisdom delivered with the timing of a stage professional. He speaks of ancient Oriental secrets, Native American herbal knowledge, and his own scientific discoveries with equal conviction, weaving a narrative that transforms common ingredients into mystical panacea. For demonstration purposes, he selects volunteers from the gathering crowd, plants, almost certainly, who testify to immediate relief upon sampling his concoction. You watch with mixed amusement and desperation as townspeople line up to purchase bottles at exorbitant prices, their eagerness a testament to medicine's scarcity and suffering's abundance. The elixir, likely nothing more than alcohol, vegetable dye, and perhaps a dash of laudanum for credibility, sells rapidly, leaving purses lighter and hopes temporarily inflated. A sharpshooter named Lil arrives next, her wagon more subdued, but her skills more verifiable than the professor's. She is small but wiry, dressed in fringed buckskin that suggests both showmanship and practicality, her hair braided tightly against performance interference. Her shooting gallery consists of targets, both conventional and creative, playing cards pinned to boards, glass bottles, arranged by size, metal discs, suspended from gallows-like frames. She can obliterate bottle caps at 50 paces while singing hymns, a combination that draws both church-going and saloon crowds to her performances. Her rifle, a customized Winchester with intricate scrollwork on its stock, seems an extension of her body rather than separate tool. She handles it with the casual intimacy of a long-time companion, her movements fluid as water over stone. Between shots, she tells stories of her travels, adventures, and narrow escapes that may or may not be embellished for theatrical effect. The crowd doesn't care about veracity. They care about the momentary transportation her tales provide, the brief vacation from their own hardscrabble existence. She charges admission, 10 cents for adults, 5 for children, but offers one free performance on Sunday after church, her marksmanship somehow transformed into moral lesson when accompanied by appropriate scriptural references. A strongman completes the trinity of traveling entertainment. A mountain of muscle named Evine, who claims Cossack heritage, but speaks with an accent suggesting closer origins. He bends horseshoes but not social conventions, performing feats of strength while maintaining the stoic demeanor expected of his profession. His act involves lifting impossible weights, supporting platforms upon which audience members stand, and the culminating spectacle of bending an iron bar around his substantial forearm. The town gathers, pockets ready to be emptied, in exchange for momentary wonder. After months of routine, punctuated only by natural disaster and human violence, these performances offer rare opportunity for communal experience that doesn't involve death or legal proceedings. Children perch on parents' shoulders for better viewing. Adults set aside class distinctions to stand shoulder to shoulder before makeshift stages. Even the perpetually dour sheriff allows himself the occasional grunt of appreciation at particularly impressive displays. You watch the elixir froth, the bullets bloom, the metal contort, and you almost believe in magic, or at least in the human capacity for creating illusion convincing enough to temporarily eclipse reality. For brief moments, dirt streets become theaters, spectators become audiences, and hard lives pause in collective appreciation of skill and showmanship. Then dawn reveals empty wallets and lingering headaches, the inevitable aftermath of frontier entertainment. The performers move on to the next settlement, leaving behind memories, emptier pockets, and in the case of Professor Wonderkind, several cases of stomach distress attributable to his miracle cure. The town returns to its regular rhythms, the interlude of diversion already fading like a dream upon waking. Your health falters. The cough that began as occasional irritation now demands center stage, interrupting sleep and conversation with increasing frequency. It starts as tickle deep in your chest, then escalates to percussive expulsion that leaves you breathless and occasionally dizzy. Nights are spent hacking into rags, each speckled with rust-colored confession, blood mixed with phlegm, visible evidence of interior deterioration, tuberculosis, maybe. The symptoms align with what you've observed in others, the wasting, the night sweats, the characteristic cough that seems to emanate from places lungs shouldn't reach. The doctor, consulted during one of his intermittent visits to town, listens to your chest with a stethoscope that has witnessed more death than healing. His face remains professionally neutral, but his eyes betray diagnosis before his words confirm it. Consumption, he says, rolling the word as though tasting its syllables for poison, early stages, but progressing. He says rest, fresh air, good food, the standard prescription that assumes resources and options you don't possess. You laugh dryly, triggering another coughing spell that serves as ironic punctuation to his advice. Rest is for corpses. The air here is equal parts dust and manure, and good food is a fable told to children in coastal cities. The doctor watches your paroxysm with clinical detachment, waiting for it to subside before continuing. Colorado might help, he suggests. Dry mountain air seems to slow the disease's progress for some patients. Sanitariums in Denver offer treatment, expensive but more promising than remaining here. The recommendation might as well be to fly to the moon. Your financial situation barely sustains current existence, let alone travel to specialized treatment facilities. The doctor recognizes the futility in your expression and sighs, reaching into his bag for the frontier's universal palliative. He prescribes laudanum instead, tincture of opium mixed with alcohol, the standard response to conditions beyond current medical address. The small brown bottle he hands you represents both compassion and surrender, acknowledgement that science can offer diagnosis but not cure. You take it because oblivion is cheaper than treatment, because pain relief, when available, is not a luxury but necessity, because sometimes medication's primary purpose is to ease the transition between states of being. The bottle becomes companion, its contents measuring days in diminishing volume. A teaspoon before bed transforms coughing fits into distant thunder rather than immediate storm. 2 teaspoons creates a buffer between consciousness and the increasingly brittle container that houses it. You ration carefully, aware that dependency lurks within amber solution, that temporary escape can become permanent prison if dosage outpaces discipline. One morning you find a wanted poster bearing a sketch that could pass for any man with facial hair and bad intentions. It's tacked to the board outside the sheriff's office, one among dozens of similar notices, each promising reward for the capture or confirmed death of individuals whose crimes range from horse theft to multiple murder. The frontier's version of employment listings. These posters represent opportunity for those with sufficient courage or desperation to pursue society's designated outlaws. Reward $200. The sum jumps from the page, temporarily overshadowing the risk it represents. $200 could purchase train fare to Denver, treatment at one of those sanitariums the doctor mentioned, perhaps even recovery rather than lingering decline. The bounty hunter in you perks up, calculating odds and angles, imagining success where experience suggests caution. Then you note the alias, Jack Rattlesnake O'Carter, rumored quick draw, confirmed sociopath. The poster lists an impressive catalogue of alleged crimes: stage robbery, cattle rustling, 3 murders known to authorities, and others suspected but unproven. The sketch shows a hard-eyed man with features rendered generic by an artist who likely never saw his subject, but the description is more specific. 6 feet tall, scar across left cheek, missing tip of right index finger, distinctive silver-handled Colt revolver. You fold the poster into your pocket anyway. Poverty breeds optimism, or at least suspends disbelief regarding one's own mortality. The fantasy of capturing Carter, of bringing him to justice, while simultaneously solving your financial and health problems, is seductive enough to temporarily eclipse rational assessment of your combat capabilities, minimal versus those of a professional criminal, presumably substantial. Weeks later, you stumble upon Carter at the edge of town, or rather, upon someone matching his description closely enough to merit attention. He stands outside the livery, negotiating with the stable master over a horse that seems too fine for honest acquisition. Hat low over eyes, scar high on cheekbone, exactly as described. Silver-handled revolver visible beneath open coat. The identification seems certain beyond coincidence. You feign casual, hand on revolver, you hardly know how to fire, pulse hammering loud enough to drown rational thought. The distance between you and potential salvation's death narrows with each step, your approach disguised as aimless wandering rather than purposeful confrontation. Carter, if indeed it is he, continues his transaction, apparently unconcerned by your proximity. Then he notices, head turning with the deliberate slowness of a predator identifying potential threat. His eyes are exactly as imagined, cold as mountain lakes in February, calculating as a banker reviewing collateral requirements. He smiles thin as a razor, the expression never reaching those frozen eyes, and asks if you're lost. The question contains multiple layers: geographical inquiry, existential assessment, and subtle warning. Your courage unravels like cheap twine. The fantasy of bounty hunter glory dissolves before the reality of professional violence personified. You stammer something about mistaken identity, about confusion regarding the stable's business hours, about anything except your true purpose. Carter's smile remains fixed, while his eyes perform inventory of your character and capabilities, finding both wanting. He laughs, the sound devoid of humor, but rich with understanding. His hand, the right one, indeed missing a fingertip, pats your shoulder with mock companionship, the contact firm enough to communicate physical superiority without escalating to actual threat. He advises you to keep your weapon holstered, unless you plan to use it, the counsel delivered as one might instruct a child on handling scissors. You nod, instantly decide bounty hunting is hazardous to longevity, and retreat until pride stops bleeding. The wanted poster burns in your pocket, its promise now revealed as trap rather than opportunity. Later you tear it into tiny pieces and watch them scatter in the wind, evidence of temporary madness, disposed of like shameful correspondence. Occasionally wonder prevails, despite hardship and disappointment. At twilight, desert colors melt into purples that defy paint's ability to capture, hues that exist somewhere between visible spectrum and dream palette. The transformation happens quickly but not suddenly, a gradual shift as sun relinquishes dominance to approaching night, its final rays catching dust particles suspended in still air. You stand on a ridge above town and watch mesas shapeshift under sinking light, their massive forms softened by distance and shadow, silhouettes of ancient giants nursing the sun to sleep. Their dark bulk against the fading sky suggests permanence beyond human comprehension. These formations witness the first human footprints in this territory and will likely outlast all current structures and aspirations. Coyotes serenade from hidden arroyos, their voices rising in harmonic discord that somehow perfectly expresses the landscape's essence. Their song contains centuries of adaptation, of survival against odds, of finding sufficient sustenance where humans see only deprivation. It is beautiful in its wildness, unsettling in its alienness, a reminder that civilization here is temporary tenant rather than permanent master. Wind sighs through sage, carrying the desert's complex perfume, mineral dust, sun-baked vegetation, the faint metallic hint of water too deep for anything but the most determined roots. Each breath fills lungs with essence, distilled from geological time, connecting momentary human existence to cycles measured in millennia rather than seasons. For 3 heartbeats, time forgets cruelty. The beauty suspends suffering, creates pause, in which transcendence becomes possible, if not sustainable. You exist without past regret or future anxiety, present only in the witnessing of color and shadow against ancient stone. It is perhaps the closest thing to prayer this territory permits, communion with forces larger and more enduring than human striving. Then your stomach growls and reality elbows in. Beauty does not nourish bodies, however much it might sustain spirits. The moment passes, returning you to physical needs and practical concerns. You descend toward town, as darkness claims the landscape, carrying the memory of briefly suspended time, like a talisman against the night's inevitable discomforts. A traveling photographer sets up a wet plate camera, promising to immortalize anyone for $5. His portable studio occupies space beside the general store, a black tent for developing plates, a backdrop painted with European garden scene incongruously tropical for this arid landscape, a chair positioned precisely for optimal light capture. The camera itself sits atop substantial tripod, its brass lens catching sunlight like mechanized eye. The photographer, a dapper man despite frontier conditions, his vest buttoned despite heat, his mustache waxed to precision points, explains his process to gathering onlookers. The technology, while not new, remains sufficiently novel in this remote location to attract curiosity. He describes chemical processes in layman's terms, the magic by which light becomes permanent record, the transformation of momentary arrangement into enduring testimony. You scrape coins, counting and recounting meager savings, weighing photographic immortality against more practical expenditures. The decision isn't rational. $5 represents significant percentage of your worldly wealth, but something beyond logic drives the choice. Perhaps it's vanity, perhaps the desire to leave evidence of existence, perhaps simple human hunger to be seen and recorded. The photographer positions you carefully, adjusting color and suggesting expression most likely to survive the exposure time required. Remain absolutely still, he instructs, ducking beneath the camera's black cloth to check framing. Breathe shallowly, if you must breathe at all. Movement blurs, and blurring suggests either intoxication or weak character to those who later view the image. You pose stiffly while chemicals hiss and glass plates shimmer, the process requiring patience beyond modern comprehension. Seconds stretch like warm taffy, muscles protest enforced immobility, eyes water from prohibited blinking. The photographer counts exposure time audibly, each number bringing relief closer, until finally he emerges from behind apparatus to announce completion. Minutes later, he hands you a fragile mirror of yourself, gaunt, dirt-streaked, eyes feral yet stubborn. The image captures more than physical appearance. It records transformation, the distance traveled from who you were to who you've become. This face has seen death casual as breakfast, has tasted water foul enough to qualify as poison, has weathered sun that burns and wind that scours. You almost don't recognize the frontier animal you've become, this creature adapted to hardship as others adapt to comfort. You protect the photograph carefully, wrapping it in clean cloth before storing it in your coat's inner pocket. It represents not just expense, but connection to self, to place, to the person you were before crossing invisible boundaries that separate civilization's certainties from frontier possibilities. The image will travel back eastward someday perhaps, evidence of experimentation with alternate existence. One night, flames light the sky. The boarding house. Fire is the settlement's perpetual nightmare, the threat that hovers over construction primarily comprising seasoned wood and canvas, materials that welcome flame as desert welcomes rain. A shout goes up. Fire, the word carrying more terror than any gunshot or Indian war cry. It passes from throat to throat, a verbal alarm bell ringing through the town's communal consciousness. You wake choking on smoke, floorboards sizzling beneath bare feet. The room that was coffin-shaped in dimension now threatens to become coffin in function. Smoke rolls in waves, thick and acrid, carrying chemical signatures of burning wood, fabric, perhaps flesh. Heat presses like physical weight, forcing movement close to floor where oxygen remains marginally breathable. You crash through the hallway, dodge falling beams, and dive into street night wearing nothing but scorched long johns and terror. The transition from inferno to open-air shock system, from superheated corridor to night chill, from choking confinement to respiratory freedom. You gasp, drawing clean air into protesting lungs, momentarily incapable of action beyond gratitude for continued existence. Around you, others emerge in similar states of undress and panic. The blacksmith, wearing only union suit with trapdoor hanging open, revealing more anatomy than intended. The school mom clutching ledger books rather than practical possessions, her hair loose around shoulders, never publicly displayed before emergency. The gambler fully dressed, despite his priorities sufficiently ordered to include coat and hat during evacuation. The town forms a bucket line, organized with surprising speed given the hour and circumstance. They stretch from nearest water source to burning building, passing containers hand to hand in relay that transforms individual weakness into collective power. But water is scarce, and the fire gorges itself on dry timber until only a skeletal chimney remains, brick and stone outlasting their wooden framework like bones surviving flesh. You lose everything: threadbare clothes, hidden savings, the photograph, now ash. Material possession has always been tenuous in this environment, but this forced surrender of already minimal belongings strikes with surprising force. Identity itself seems threatened, without even the costume of frontier adaptation. What remains? Physical inventory reveals survival with minor injury: blistered feet, singed hair, lungs that protest with each breath. Others fare worse. The landlady suffers burns requiring bandaging. One guest leapt from second-story window and now cradles arm bent at unnatural angle. Another is noticeably absent from survivor count. The dawn reveals charred timber and collapsed structure where temporary home once stood, smoke still rising from pockets of persistent combustion. Homeless, you join a wagon train heading further west, believing distance is antidote to accumulated misfortune. The caravan assembles on town's outskirts, 12 wagons of varying age and condition, pulled by oxen, mules, occasionally horses, depending on owner's means. Families predominate, their possessions packed tightly into available space, their faces showing mixture of hope and apprehension appropriate to major geographical commitment. The wagon master, a leathery man with beard containing more gray than original color, demands labor in exchange for passage. He assesses your capabilities with quick glance that takes in physical condition, apparent strength, and desperation level. His judgment is accurate, if not charitable. You can work but bring little specialized skill to the enterprise. To drive oxen, patch wheels, stand guard at night, he offers, the terms presented as statement rather than negotiation. No room for passengers on this run. Every mouth eats, every hand works. You agree because what's left to lose? The arrangement seems fair. Exchange labor for transportation, contribution for inclusion. The alternative, remaining in town with even fewer resources than before the fire, offers no obvious advantage. At least movement creates illusion of progress, of leaving difficulty behind rather than marinating in it. The trail is a ribbon of ruts etched into eternity, visible proof of previous passage, but no guarantee of future success. Each wagon follows identical path, wheels settling into depressions carved by predecessors, the route determined by geography and the collective wisdom of those who survived to tell others which way to go. It stretches before the caravan like physical manifestation of hope, tenuous, winding, but leading somewhere other than here. Days rattle by in jarring rhythms, creak, thunk, cough, pray. The wagons groan under their loads, wood protesting constant stress, canvas covers snapping in wind like sails without ocean. Wheels hit rocks, stumps, inconsistencies in terrain that transmit shock through vehicle to passengers inside. The human cargo develops bruises in unlikely places, muscles adapt to constant motion, senses adjust to perpetual transition. Children adapt fastest to nomadic existence, finding games and counting butterflies, or collecting interesting stones during rest stops. They run alongside wagons until exhausted, then ride until recovered enough to run again. Their voices carry on wind, momentarily transforming arduous journey into adventure, perspective unavailable to adults responsible for safe passage. At night, coyotes circle like auditors, their eyes reflecting campfire light as they assess human vulnerability from safe distance. Guards stand 2-hour shifts, rotating through night to ensure constant vigilance against threats, both animal and human. Conversations happen in whispers, voices instinctively lowered, as darkness amplifies both sound and its accompanying fears. Every snapping twig rewinds your pulse, refocuses attention on surrounding shadows, where imagination populates darkness with danger. Crossing a river, a wheel shatters. The tributary seems minor on approach, perhaps 40 feet across, current visible but not apparently threatening, banks sloped rather than steep. The first wagons cross without incident, water reaching only to axles, drivers encouraging nervous draft animals with whips and words. Then comes catastrophic crack, like gunshot, wheel giving way under combination of water pressure and hidden obstacle. The current swipes crates of flour, a child's doll, one grown man who couldn't swim. The wagon tilts dangerously, its contents sliding toward the broken side, its occupants scrambling for opposite rail to counterbalance. Water pours in through gaps between floorboards, soaking everything not already jettisoned by impact. The oxen, panicked by sudden drag on their harness, thrash in the shallows, their movements threatening to overturn the vehicle entirely. You pull until shoulders scream, joining others in human chain that extends from shore to stricken wagon. The water is cold despite season, its clarity deceptive regarding depth and force. Hands lock on wrists, creating living bridge strong enough to resist current's persistent pressure. The family evacuates along this human path, woman with infant clutched to chest, children wide-eyed with terror, husband returning repeatedly for salvageable possessions, until physically restrained by wagon master. You salvage what floats, bury what doesn't. The man's body washes downstream before recovery is possible, tumbling end over end in current too swift for swimmers to safely pursue. The preacher, a circuit rider who joined the caravan at its formation, murmurs a few words over symbolic grave dug, where the drowned man's wife can visit before departure. The river keeps the actual remains, adding them to collection of secrets carried toward distant ocean. You notice the water's cold clarity and drink greedily, then remember upstream cattle carcasses spotted during yesterday's travel. The memory triggers immediate physical response, stomach clenching in preemptive rejection, throat closing against potential contamination. You vomit into the reeds, body expelling liquid regardless of its scarcity in this environment. Lesson: trust nothing. Liquid, no matter how appealing its appearance. The caravan continues with one less wagon, its contents distributed among remaining vehicles, its human cargo accommodated through collective compression of already limited space. The man's widow rides with another family, her silent grief, a presence more substantial than her physical form. Her children ask questions that have no answers worth giving. Adults exchange glances that communicate helplessness without requiring verbalization. Plains stretch, oceans of grass, hiding arrows. The landscape transforms from desert to prairie, from scarcity to apparent abundance. Grass grows waist-high in places, rippling in wind like green gold sea. Wildflowers create splashes of color, blue lupine, orange blanket flower, purple cone flower, their presence testament to soil's fertility compared to regions recently traversed. One twilight the wind carries distant whoops. The sound is faint but distinctive, immediately recognizable to those who've crossed these territories before. The wagon master orders tongues tied, fires doused. His instructions come without explanation, but receive immediate compliance. Fear provides context where words are unnecessary. Wagons form defensive circle, each vehicle positioned to create continuous barrier, tongues facing inward like spokes of enormous wheel. You crouch behind wheels, musket ready, though you barely know which end is business. The weapon borrowed from wagon master's personal arsenal feels heavy and awkward in hands more accustomed to hammer than firearms. You listen intently, straining to separate natural night sounds from those indicating human approach. Your breath seems unnaturally loud, hearts pounding audible to your own ears, if not companions. Horse silhouettes, crest a ridge, pause, vanish. The apparition lasts seconds, dark shapes against star-filled sky, momentarily visible then gone like smoke dispersed by changing wind. No attack materializes, no arrows rain upon the encampment, no painted warriors descend whooping from surrounding hills. The night yawns on, minutes stretching to hours, tension gradually yielding to exhaustion. Dawn reveals arrow shafts lodged in wagon sides, feathers fluttering like rude greetings. The message is clear though, no words were exchanged. We could have, but didn't, not yet. The emigrants examine these calling cards with expressions mixing fear and resignation. The arrows are expertly crafted, shafts straight as judgment, flint heads napped to deadly sharpness, feathers secured with sinew wrapped in precise pattern. Nobody died. This time, you exhale a month's worth of adrenaline, the release leaving you momentarily lightheaded. The wagon master collects the arrows, examining each before adding it to growing bundle tucked beneath his seat. Knowledge gathered, intelligence assessed. The caravan departs earlier than usual, its pace marginally faster despite draft animals' protests. Mountains loom, all jagged sermon and snow-caps sneer. The front range of the Rockies emerges on horizon like frozen tsunami, peaks sharp enough to threaten sky itself. Distance deceives. Landmarks that appear close enough to reach by afternoon require weeks steady travel to approach. Scale confounds eastern perception. Distances expand beyond pedestrian comprehension. You hike switchbacks, breath frosting, feet mutiny. The ascent transforms rolling journey into vertical challenge. Wagons requiring additional oxen teams on steeper portions. Men walking alongside to prevent vehicles from sliding backward on loose gravel. Progress slows to crawl, miles per day, becoming yards per hour. Ambition yielding to geological reality. Avalanches prowl overhead, snow cornices extending over trail like nature's guillotines. The possibility of sudden burial influences every decision: when to travel, which passage to attempt, how loudly to speak. Sound itself becomes hazard, vibrations potentially triggering snow's release from precarious perch. The caravan moves in near silence, conversations conducted in whispers, even oxen seeming to understand necessity for muted progress. High passes, smell of pine and imminent doom. The air thins with elevation gain, making both breathing and thinking more difficult. Headaches plague those unaccustomed to altitude. Vision blurs at inopportune moments. Judgment suffers from oxygen deprivation. Yet the scent of evergreen provides unlikely comfort. These trees suggest life's foothold even in harsh conditions, adaptation rather than surrender. One mule slips, tumbles, disappears into white silence. The animal's descent happens with cinematic slowness. Hoof placement fails. Legs scrabble for purchase against loose shale, body tilts beyond recovery point, then gravity asserts its mathematical certainty. No scream accompanies the fall, just dull percussive series as body impacts ledges during 1,000-foot drop. You learn prayer is louder at altitude, desperation producing volume fear might otherwise suppress. Finally, after months that feel like borrowed eternity, you reach a valley rumored fertile. The wagon master declares end of line, this location matching description provided by previous explorers as suitable for settlement. The valley stretches perhaps 10 miles in length, 2 or 3 in width, carved by river now running high with snowmelt. Mountains protect 3 sides, leaving only southern approach vulnerable to both weather and potential enemies. You stake a claim staked by nothing but resolve. The process is both simpler and more complex than imagined. No formal documentation exists here, beyond crude maps drawn by previous travelers. No authority grants permission beyond personal determination to defend chosen territory. You select land near river but above floodplain, with southern exposure for garden plots and sufficient timber nearby for construction needs. You build a shack of felled pine and call it home because words are cheap. The structure rises over weeks rather than days, logs notched and stacked, chinked with mud and moss, roofed with split shingles, laboriously shaped by hand. It is primitive by Eastern standards, palace by comparison to recent accommodations. Single room serves all functions, cooking, sleeping, living. Its dimensions determined by how much space one person requires for basic existence. Spring soil is stingy, seeds sulk, frost laughs. The growing season at this elevation is brutally short, perhaps 90 days between killing frosts, if weather proves cooperative. You turn earth with borrowed plow, prepare furrows with careful attention to drainage and exposure, plant seeds with murmured encouragement that feels foolish but costs nothing. The soil is rocky, requiring constant removal of stones that migrate upward with each freeze-thaw cycle, as though pushed by geological spite. You stubbornly plant anyway because hope is feral. Potatoes, beans, corn, squash, crops chosen for hardiness rather than preference, for caloric yield rather than flavor. Each seed represents potential beyond its size. Each sprout eventually emerging from dark earth causes disproportionate celebration. Growth is victory against considerable odds, persistent defiance of conditions that prefer barrenness. Days are sweat, nights are numb fingers, and stories around a fire too small to fight stars. Physical labor from dawn till dusk transforms body. Hands develop calluses thick as leather, shoulders broaden from constant axe swing, legs strengthen from hillside climbs. Sleep comes instantly, most nights, exhaustion overriding discomfort of straw mattress, or nighttime temperature fluctuations that can exceed 40 degrees. Neighbors, sparse as punctuation, ride over to introduce themselves with rifles displayed politely across saddle horns. The nearest homestead lies 3 miles distant, far enough for privacy, close enough for emergency assistance. The social contract here is simple: respect boundaries, assist when needed, otherwise maintain comfortable distance that allows each settler their necessary sovereignty. They offer pie and warnings about bears larger than nightmares. The pie serviceberry filling, encased in lard crust, represents significant sacrifice in an environment where sugar qualifies as precious metal and fruit requires difficult gathering from wild rather than cultivated sources. The warnings come with specific detail: which creek valleys hold hibernation dens, which berry patches attract bears during late summer feeding frenzy, which trail signs indicate recent ursine passage. You trade pie for ammunition because sugar is luxury, survival isn't. The exchange happens without discussion of relative value, both items necessary, both requiring effort to obtain, both representing currency more practical than paper notes, rarely seen, and less frequently trusted. The neighbors depart with casual invitation to Sunday supper when gardens producing, the offer both hospitable and realistic about seasonal limitations. Years edge by. You grow calluses where city folk grow complaints. Winters are exercises in endurance. Food stored during brief growing season must stretch across months when snow lies 4 feet deep and temperatures drop low enough to freeze mercury in thermometers. You learn to bank fire overnight, to preserve precious coals, to wear layers that trap body heat in cellular pockets, to recognize frostbite's early numbness before tissue damage becomes irreversible. Your cough eventually subsides, the mountain air providing relief that medicine couldn't. Tuberculosis retreats, though whether conquered or merely dormant remains uncertain. Physical labor builds resistance that idle life never could, each season making you stronger than the preceding one, adaptation occurring at cellular level rather than conscious decision. You outlive smallpox outbreaks, gunfights, snakebite, and heartbreaks you refuse to name. Disease scythes through less isolated settlements, news arriving via infrequent travelers who carry information along with goods and mail. You hear of entire towns decimated by invisible pathogens, of violence flaring over diminishing resources, of conflicts between indigenous populations and ever-encroaching settlers. Distance provides buffer against contagion, both biological and social. Your hair grays, your eyes sharpen, vision accommodates to vast distances, focusing easily on movement miles away. Approaching rider, deer at forest edge, storm clouds gathering beyond far ridges. Hearing attunes to environmental signals, the change in bird calls that precedes weather shifts, the subtle snap of twig that announces animal presence, the difference between wind in pine versus aspen that suggests seasonal transitions. You forget birthdays and remember sunsets. Time loses rigid demarcation, flowing according to natural rather than artificial measures. Years blend together, differentiated by notable occurrences rather than calendar designations. The winter of heavy snow, the summer crops failed, the spring, the grizzly killed Thompson's milk cow. Urgency fades, replaced by patience, measured in seasons and growth rings, rather than minutes and meetings. The West does not civilize. You do not tame. You strike a truce etched in scar tissue. The relationship becomes one of mutual accommodation rather than dominance. You adapt to the land's demands. It tolerates your presence with the indifference of geological time frames. The arrangement lacks romance, but offers authenticity unavailable in environments more thoroughly bent to human preference. One morning you spot railroad smoke curling like a question mark beyond the ridge. The sight is both expected and jarring, progress inevitable, yet somehow surprising when it finally materializes. Steel tracks now connect territories previously isolated by distance and difficulty, bringing with them changes both obvious and subtle. Towns spring up around stations, populations surge with immigrants drawn by newly accessible opportunity, commerce accelerates with improved transportation. Engineers and surveyors had promised this arrival for years, their predictions greeted with increasing skepticism as deadlines passed without materialization. Now reality catches up to promise, delivering technology that transforms travel from endurance test to manageable journey. The locomotive's distant whistle carries on clear mountain air, auditory evidence of civilization's advancing frontier. You stand on your porch, dirt under nails, heart knotting with jealousy and relief. The tracks pass 10 miles distant, close enough to access when necessary, yet far enough to preserve the isolation that has become both habit and preference. You watch smoke rising straight in still air, imagining the passengers inside those wooden coaches, their expectations, their prejudices, their ignorance of what this territory actually demands from its inhabitants. The world you fought is already antique, photographed, romanticized. Eastern publications print stories of Wild West adventures alongside advertisements for patent medicines and corsets, fashioning entertainment from experiences that were anything but entertaining to those who lived them. Dime novels transform frontier survival into heroic narrative. Painters capture sublime landscapes without including the mundane brutalities they contain. Everyone collectively rewrites history while it's still unfolding. They will call it wild, lawless, heroic. These labels simplify complexity into marketable narrative, transform struggle into entertainment, commodify experience for consumption by those who never felt alkali dust fill their lungs or watched companion die from infected wound that modern medicine might consider minor inconvenience. The mythologizing has begun even as the reality continues, parallel narratives growing increasingly divergent with each retelling. They will call you pioneer, outlaw, legend, anything but tired. These designations miss the essential experience, the grinding dailiness of existence, the accumulated toll of decisions made under duress, the slow transformation from stranger to participant in environment that demands complete presence. They will remember the dramatic moments, while forgetting the endless ordinary tasks that actually constitute frontier life. Would you survive a single day back in that first dust-choked dawn? Maybe. But survival wasn't the point. The point was the living in all its filthy, ruthless, incandescent raw. The hardship created the meaning. The difficulty defined the achievement. The sacrifice gave value to what remained. Without these elements, the experience becomes mere anecdote rather than formative crucible. And now, as twilight settles over your homestead, and coyotes tune their eternal hymn, you let the West breathe through you one last time. The ritual is private, acknowledging what the territory has taken and given, what you've surrendered and gained, how place and person have shaped each other through reluctant partnership. The air is still sharp, still tasting of gunpowder and regret, but it is also yours. You inhale, exhale, and somewhere in the distance, another greenhorn wakes in the dust, believing history is boring and sleep is easy. You smile because you know better. The knowing itself is victory, hard won, bloody, complete. The greenhorn will learn or perish, adapt or disappear, just as you did, just as all must, who venture beyond comfort's boundaries. The cycle continues, the frontier advances, and the West abides, indifferent to human ambition, yet silently witnessing each small triumph against its formidable resistance.